And then I know, again, I've watched a lot of stuff
That's
about
cool,
you.
man.
You said you were trying to build up your upper chest, right?
Yeah.
For the front pose,
Yep.
correct?
Everything from here up on the front poses needs to be just more, bigger, fuller, rounder.
Okay, so can you break down kind of how you would structure that in your? I asked you yesterday, but just for the people
Yeah.
listening, how you would structure. I've got a lot of questions on our anabolic account, how to bring up a lagging body part, or just how to approach it and structure it in maybe a program, or if you just kind of freestyle workouts.
Yeah.
How many times a week should you hit it? How much is too much or too little?
Again, I think a lot of it is so individual that it's hard to put like real limits on it. You have to go by how you're feeling, right? So let's start. That's a pretty multifaceted question. Let's start with how you would structure the programming for like your upper chest, say, because there's literally no such thing as too much upper chest. Not a single person on the face of the earth. You look at him, you're like, man, he did too much incline press. His upper chest is too big. Like that just doesn't exist, right? So with the upper chest, we know that that's a priority, but we also know that in order to build the upper chest and stuff like that, our shoulders have to be strong. And so in order to be able to press that heavier weight, our scapula also has to be strong enough to hold us in that correct position. So you have to train all of that in balance. For me personally, I've found that like chest and shoulders twice a week is totally fine. You're going to get good chest stimulation, you're going to be fairly recovered, and you're going to also be able to get good shoulder stimulation. And so I structured the two, like those two workouts. Those are my two main days. We have chest and shoulders, we have legs, we have back, and those chest and shoulders comes about every 3 days, and that's how I structure it. Let's see, where else should I go with that? I think it's important to make sure that you mix your stimulation between the heavy compound stuff and the volume stuff that really helps to isolate it, especially in the upper chest. Because if you just say, for example, you just make sure you start twice a week with incline barbell press and go heavy, you're going to do something, but you're not necessarily going to figure out how to isolate that chest in that incline barbell press. So sometimes start with something a little bit lighter, like dumbbell incline, for example, and focus on the isolation, and then go as heavy as you possibly can while isolating that upper chest, because as you inch that number up, your barbell is going to be better at just using your chest primarily rather than mixing the chest and shoulders so much. So there's a lot of give and take with that stuff to make your body able to take those things to the next level, endurance and strength-wise.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, that breaks it down pretty good. And then on the topic of structure, you just said you have a somewhat structure with training, like you have, you prioritize certain muscle groups.
Mm-hmm.
But yesterday we talked about, following a certain workout regimen, writing things down, tracking things. So I found it interesting. I'm the same way. I do the same thing with Mark, is we kind of just go in the gym and go off feel. So how beneficial, do you think if you got on a program now, you would get crazy amount of progress? How important do you think a training program is compared to just kind of doing what you do and just using intensity and stimulating the muscle regardless of what exercise you choose or if you're tracking or not?
I've never been the guy to do that. I've never carried around a notebook in the gym or really tracked my progress, even my progression as far as strength. It's just not something I've really tracked, mainly because I've only really trained as a bodybuilder. I never was a powerlifter first, and so I competed in powerlifting because then I could see a real benefit to, hey, I went up 5 pounds each day, each week in the movements I'm tracking. But for me, that never really was a thing. I didn't even really care how much weight I lifted. It was always about the stimulation of the body. I feel like another reason a bodybuilder would use a plan like that is if you had a coach working with you, especially if it was a remote coach, and so the coach needed to know exactly what you were doing so that he could make the changes he thought were necessary. Whereas if somebody tried to coach me in training and they're like, well, what did you do for chest last week? I'd be like, well, last week I did this, 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 and this. And the week before I did something completely different. And, then another guy can't come in and say, well, it was that didn't breed the results and we need to add more of this to breed those results. But since I make those decisions myself, I don't see a need to catalog it. I think I do a much better job, intuitively just knowing what my body feels good doing and what my body needs. Now there is some structure, of course, like the split, we train the same things on the same day most of the time. But what happens if, Thursday's not the same Thursday as it was last week and you just shift it around? If that's going to really mess up your training, then you're going to have a really hard time. But if you can easily swap those days out and roll with those punches, as a whole, you're going to do better, I think.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. Another thing that's very refreshing, because everybody now is by the book with everything, has to write everything down, has to track everything. So every workout has to be the same.
Yeah, and I mean, look, there's definitely some good to that. Like, you know, let's go back to the scientific method. Like, that is literally the way you track progress. I get that. But I'll look at it like this. My focus is not on my progress. My focus is on my end result. And I feel like by developing the relationship I have with my body and the flexibility and intuition that I have with my training, my result is better. I don't focus on that. I feel like the guys that focus so much on the minutia of their training, they miss learning how to make those decisions themselves. It's almost like you're just going through a process that somebody else has designed for you. You're not designing a process. You're not creating anything. And that's what I think I find the beauty in that, in training. We're creating something. This is our art. This is our lifestyle. I didn't want homework, you know. I didn't want to follow someone's plan.
Yeah.
I love this too much.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. So, touching on Charles Glass, he's a legend in the bodybuilding world. Very smart man. When did you link up with him? In 2015 when you got there, or how did you guys kind of cross paths and start working together?
I mean, I was a dude that was watching Charles' videos from Albuquerque when I was working in the computer store. You know, I was that guy, and I knew that I wanted to work with him. I loved all the things he did. I learned so much from him like that, and so I went to Gold's. And I mean, I would say that I hounded Charles. You know, I mean, there's plenty of people who want to work with Charles, and plenty of people with a lot more potential and fanfare and stuff that Charles, especially when I first got there, he was still working with a lot of the pros and stuff. But I just went and pursued it, you know, that's as plain as I can say it. I pursued him. I was like, Charles, I want to work with you. Charles, I want to learn from you. Charles, I want to this. Charles, I want to be around you. Charles, I want to know you. And it was pretty much like that. And I just, you know, we're good friends and we worked really well together. But yeah, man, training with Charles, it was just something I knew had to happen. Yeah. You know, that's why I went to Gold.
Yeah.